In this video, we're going to talk about the importance of deployment and give you some hints and tips as to how to improve your Shatterpoint game. Hey guys, Rich from Richmond Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well. Welcome to this, another Star Wars Shatterpoint video. And this is hopefully going to be the first in a little series that we're going to do over the next couple of months, where we go through different aspects of the game. I give my thoughts and views on maybe the best way to do things and some hints and tips, maybe to help you guys try and improve your game as well. And now I want to start off with the very beginning. I suppose not the very beginning, that's when you're picking your squads and everything else like that, but once the game is all set up and you're ready to play, obviously the first thing you need to do is deploy your two squads. And there's a couple of things you need to take into consideration. Which side of the board do you want to choose if you're the secondary or primary player, or first or second player, sorry. Do you want to start in a particular stance, and whereabouts on the board do you want to deploy your two squads? So we're going to go through a couple of examples. I'm going to give you my sort of standard deployment that I think works with most of the different squads or different strike teams that are out there at the moment. Show you a couple of variations of that as well, depending on what we call them factions, but what keywords you're bringing, and then also talk a little bit about the stance cards and how to make the choices to which stance you probably want to start in. So let's jump over to the other camera. I was going to do this on TTS and I thought, well, no, I've got the setup over here, so let's head over to the real life camera and I'll show you a couple of examples and what we're talking about. Okay guys, so we are at our board edge here. This is our deployment zone. Obviously we're just looking at our side of the board here. We're not too concerned about everything that's past there at the moment. Now, what I want to show you first of all is my standard deployment, and everything else is a variation of this. It's my standard deployment that means you're going to be able to hit all three of these back points. Now, a quick note that this is the setup for shifting priorities, which is obviously the only map set in the game right now. However, that could change, or that will change, should I say. So we know that this is just for that map set. However, when others come out, I'll maybe do videos on those as well. So the thing for me is I want to make sure I'm hitting these 3 points because each of the 3 phase 1 struggles is going to activate one of these individual points here. Let me just make sure I've got that in the right place. So we have got Steal the Secret Plans, which is always going to be in the middle, irrespective of who's the first and second player. We've got Locate the Asset, which if we're looking at as the first player is going to be this left hand side, and then we've got Recon Enemy Positions, which is going to be this right hand side here. Sorry, left hand side for Locate the Asset, right hand side for Recon Enemy Positions, but obviously they can flip depending on whether you're the first or second player. So as I mentioned, we want to make sure that we are hitting and getting characters covering all 3 of these points, because as I mentioned, or as you guys know, you do not flip the struggle, you do not activate the tokens until after you've deployed, so you do not know. So I've got 2 squads with me today. I'm just going to bring, we've got Obi-Wan and his clones, and then we're going to bring, where has he gone? Anakin and his clones as well. So what we want to do, we've also got our range 2 deployment, our range 2 tool, which is all we need for deployment because the other side is going to be range 1 for us. And we want to try and hit a point in the board that is bang in the middle of these 2 objectives. And obviously then we deploy our primary unit. So you've got him pretty much in the middle of the board, or in the middle of these 2 objectives, as far forward as he can go. From here then, what you want to do is almost draw an imaginary line from the centre of this objective to the centre of Anakin's base, or whichever primary you're deploying, and line the range 1 tool up alongside that. Now I'm just going to put a 501st Trooper here, just like so, and you can see that he is going to be within range 2 of that left-hand objective. And then we're going to do a similar thing over here as well. So let's take Rex, we'll put him over here, and there we go. You can see that he has got that objective there as well. And then lastly, we're just going to put this guy as far forward as he'll go. I've seen a few people deploy, put behind, that sort of thing. For me, there's no real benefit to that. There's only 2 characters in the, or 2 units in the game right now that are realistically going to be able to take off one of your units, and it's highly unlikely. And you know, I want that extra movement. I want them to be able to get up to these other objectives as quickly as possible. So I sort of like this diamond-esque formation, if you like. So with a single deployment, we've now got 2 of our 3 back points covered. And then all we're going to do is the exact same on this side with Obi-Wan. So again, we'll put Obi-Wan in the middle here like so. We will take our range 2, and for this one we're going to put one of the 212th over to this side, and this one here we're going to put Cody, and then lastly we're going to put this guy as far forward as he can go. And you'll see now we've doubled up on this middle one. So even if we're the first activation and we get Rex or Cody, then one of these guys is still going to be on this point. Really important if that's the active point and you're the first player. If you're second player, it doesn't matter as much because you'll flip that and you'll keep it. But also on these ones, if we have either our 501st or our 212st, we know that these guys can move up and retain this one, and then this guy can maybe go over to another point here, and similar on this side. So I always like to double up on the middle one with 2 separate characters. And there we go. With our deployment now, we have managed to take all 3 of these points. So no matter which of the struggles we get, we know that we're going to be able to flip that one on either the first or second turn, but depending on whether we're the first or second player, obviously. There is, however, a couple of other things to take into consideration. And one thing I do want to talk about, and just a little hint and tip that you indeed may or may not know. I'm just going to grab a piece of terrain here. And let's say that we had our terrain piece here like so. There is no restriction around elevation when you are deploying. So here, for example, we've got this this building here. We might want to actually deploy our 212 up there. So as long as their base can go over it, characters can be deployed at any elevation, just making sure that their bases do not overlap. So for this one, for example, as you can see, the B2s on the bigger bases would overlap. Let's take these off the table for a moment because there are a couple of other things I want to talk about. And firstly is going to be around tactics and different tactics that characters have. So let's take Count Dooku, for example, leader of the Separatist, or the Separatist leader, but he has a tactic ability called Leader of the Separatist Army. At the start of this unit's activation, choose another Separatist Alliance character within 3. Each character in this unit and the chosen unit may dash. Now that can be any character, so that could be a unit of, well, it could be a single B1 unit, could be a Magna Guard, or it could be some of your other leaders such as Grievous or indeed Asajj. So that's just something else to consider when you are deploying. Now there's obviously lots of other characters who have tactic abilities that get you to move, or you've even got characters like Savage Opress with his Unwitting Brute, where if another Separatist Alliance or Dathomirian primary unit, when they activate, he gets to make a dash as long as he's within range 3. So that's maybe something else you want to take into consideration. But the other big one I want to talk about is going to be Kalanis. Let's leave these guys up here because we're going to show you that exact same deployment, but with our sort of out of the phase 1 separatists, if you like. And I've lost some B1s. There we go. So let's do the exact same deployment again. So we'll start with Dooku. So Dooku is going to be able to go here like so. Let's do the same with the Magna Guard. So we're getting this point. We'll do the Magna Guard here. So we're getting this point. And then because Jango is sort of a bit of a bigger hitter, has a little bit less movement than these two, he can go front and centre. Let's do the same with Asajj. So we're going to move Asajj up the board, or not move her up, but deploy her there like so. Let's put these B1s, and you'll notice with the B1s, because they've got that bigger base, we actually get a little bit more flexibility. So we can actually move these guys up a little bit further. We don't have to go and draw a direct line. They can be further up the board should you wish, because as I mentioned, that bigger base just means that they've got that little bit of extra size there to be able to capture the objectives that little bit easier. And let's do the same. Let's put Kalani up here like so. So tick box, right? We have hit all three. We've got 2 in the middle there like so. And then 1 on either side. So we know that we're going to be able to take one of these points. However, Kalani has a tactic ability called Roger Roger. At the start of this unit's activation, each allied battle droid supporting character within 4 of a character in this unit may dash. So what does that mean? Well, it means that every battle droid on the board that's a supporting unit can dash, but they have to be within 4. So obviously these B2s, or these B1s, sorry, are easily within 4. I think we may just get these ones in here, but you can see the Magna Guard on this left-hand side are really, really far away. So it's just something to take into consideration when we're deploying. So with separatists, for example, I always like to get, and for me, droid separatist lists, you're always taking Kalani. It's kind of a non-negotiable for me. I think he just does so much for the droids. So what I like to do here is, and I've moved things around a little bit there, but there we go, is get Kalani further into the middle. Now Jango has no benefit, no synergy with Kalani, so we're actually going to put this Magna Guard over to here, move this one around just a little bit, and then we can put Jango there as well. Now when we take a look at the top, if we're lucky enough to get either the Shatterpoint or Kalani, all 4 of these battle droids are going to be able to make an advance up the board. And you can start to see the possibilities that then opens up with units being able to, just move further and further up. It becomes quite a menace for your opponent, really. And as I mentioned, guys, there's going to be some other ones as well. So just always make sure you take a look. Make sure you're getting the absolute maximum from your deployment. For me, you always want to make sure you are covering all 3 objectives. There is absolutely no reason to not do that. And right now, for me, this is the optimal deployment. Just change around the order of the characters, depending on whether you've got units such as Kalani in there who require that range to be able to trigger their tactic abilities. So the last thing I want to go through, guys, is stance cards. Now, obviously, this only affects primary characters, and sometimes there's a big difference in the stance of a character. They can have a ranged attack on one side and no ranged attack on the other, or you'll often find that one of them will be that little bit more defensive, where the other one is just significantly more offensive. So let's start by taking a look then at one of those characters that has a ranged attack on one side and not a ranged attack on the other side, and that is General Grievous. Now, obviously, his 2 stances are the quad arm attack, where he has a lot more offensive ability in melee, but very, very poor defensive ability there with his whirring blades, only giving him up to 2 blocks, but only 4 dice in either of those types of attacks that he's going to be taking. And then his Cunning Warlord, which is far less in terms of damage output, but does have that range 5 attack and does have at least some better dice manipulation on his expertise, but with an extra dice is just better overall when it comes to defensive. Now, my initial thought with characters like this, so General Grievous or Darth Maul or anybody else who has a better ranged attack, was to always start in the ranged attack, and then it meant that I could move up and I could be in range, right? I could be in range and I could make an attack, even if it was the first activation. But what I've realised is, and again, this isn't going to be a hard, fast rule, but with Grievous, for example, it's actually better starting in quad arm attack. And why do I mean that? Well, if you start in quad arm attack and you don't pull Grievous first, there's a good chance that if you're activating him second or third or whatever it may be, with all of the movement that he's got, he's going to be able to get up the board and potentially be engaged with another character and be able to make that quad arm attack. Now the problem is that if you start in Cunning Warlord, you move up, you then flip to the quad arm attack, you're unable to flip back, so you're left with Grievous in the middle of the board, only rolling 4 dice. And believe me guys, he will go down to some focus fire very, very quickly. So for me, it's always better to start in the quad arm attack, which means that if you do move up, you do manage to get that melee attack off, you can then switch into Cunning Warlord and be in a much, much safer position, because he's made his one attack. He isn't going to be able to do anything else for this particular series of going through your cards. Obviously, Shatterpoint and things like that. But it does also hold true to other characters as well. Let's take a quick look at Luminara. Now, obviously, she has no ranged attack on either her Form 2 Makashi or her Form 3 Sorosu, but you can see the defensive expertise on Form 2 Sorosu is significantly better. So for me, what I like to do is once again start off in the more aggressive stance, and then I use that because I can move up, I can make attacks, and then I can flip and I can change her into her more defensive stance, meaning that she's far less likely to be taken down during that first sort of cycle through of our order cards. It's going to be different for every single character, guys, but just take a look at the cards. Most characters are generally going to have a stance, or most primary units are generally going to have a stance that is far more offensive, that is defensively weaker, and then one that is far more aggressive, that is defensively worse. Again, it's not a hard, fast rule. Just make sure you take a look at the card. But I would always start in the more aggressive stance, especially if you're deployed within range 2. There's not really any characters right now who can make an attack and hit your primaries from the off, so no real issues there. So you can be in your lesser stance to start off with, move forward, get to make your attacks with the better stance for attacks, and then flip into your more defensive stance, usually with some nice defense expertise and hopefully some dice manipulation in there as well. And there we go, guys. That is my quick video on deployment and the kind of things that you need to take into consideration. The stance card is always one that catches me out. I do everything I need to do set up, and then I always forget to flip them. So whatever reminder it is you need to set yourself to flip your stance cards at the end of an activation with a unit, just try and do something, because I know it is the one thing that I always forget. The number of times Luminara has been taken down because I forgot to flip her is I wouldn't like to say how many, but far more than I care to mention. Want to give a big shout out to Loyalist Games, the sponsor of the channel. There's a link down in the description below for a first time buyer offer there as well. Also want to give a big shout out to our Patreons. The support they give us just helps us continue to make these videos, helps us do the board setup and everything else like that, so a big shout out to them. And if you do want to support us, you can do from from as little as £1 a month. But you don't need to support us on Patreon to actually support the channel. Just engaging with the content, liking it, leaving a comment. Let me know, guys, when it comes to deployment. If you've got any other deployment hints and tips for people, did you know about the rule where you could, or not the rule, but did you know about the deployment where you could hit all 3 back points when you're deploying? Let me know down in the comment section below. We do have our Discord up and running as well, the Savage Lands, fully dedicated now to MCP and Shatterpoint. One last thing, guys, is I do want to give a big shout out to an absolute great member of our community, Joel Morales. You guys may have seen that we got a bit of an upgrade to our MCP intros a little while back. Well, he's done the exact same thing for me for the Shatterpoint. I really hope you like the little intro that he's done for us. He's just a fan. He reached out and he asked if he could do it. There's a link down in the description below to his Instagram. If you guys could head on over there, show him some love, it'd be greatly appreciated. But yeah, thank you so much, Joel, for putting that together for us. I think it looks absolutely brilliant, and hopefully you guys agree. And as always, guys, it leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, may the Force be with you.